Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Fostering a Growth Mindset and Your Personality for Success. My name is Caitlin, and I'm an Associate Marketing Manager at the Myers-Briggs Company. Today's webinar will run for approximately 1 hour, so feel free to submit questions anytime during the presentation using the questions function. And this webinar is being recorded, and we will send out an email in the next day or so with a link to the recording and a copy of the slides. So now I'm happy to introduce our speaker, Dr. Rachel Cubas-Wilkinson, Principal OD Consultant from the Myers-Briggs Company's Professional Services team. Rachel is passionate about people development, self-awareness, and leadership. Her team partners with organizations of all types to develop staff and leaders and to resolve people development challenges. Rachel holds a doctoral degree in transformative leadership from the University of New England and received her master's degree in leadership and a graduate concentration in adult learning methods, curriculum, and instruction. So I will turn it over to you now, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Really appreciate that. And thank you to all of you who are joining us live from what seems to be all over the world these days. And also thanks to you who are listening to the recording of this webinar. For those of you who are on the webinar live, there's going to be a couple of instances where I'm going to love to hear from you. And also keep in mind that we have several folks who are watching the chat. So if you do have questions or reactions or thoughts as we go through the webinar today, we'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and use the question function to submit those comments, and we will either address the questions in the webinar or we might follow up with you depending on the nature of the question. So thank you so much for joining. I'd love to talk to you about growth mindset. There's a lot that we can talk about, and I've really had to do some synthesis of research to get to sort of a much more condensed agenda for today. So here's really what we're going to look at. We're going to kind of explore 4 different areas. We're going to look at the case for growth mindset based on research. Then we're going to look at, does my organization have a growth mindset culture? And there, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm actually going to give you an opportunity to self-estimate. So begin thinking about an organization that you're a part of that you might want to apply that self-estimate to. Then we're going to look at, is growth mindset the new soft skill, right? We've heard about this for quite some time. We've heard about 21st century skills, the push for soft skills. We've heard about resiliency and other things as rising to the top as prominent soft skills. Is growth mindset one of those? And then lastly, we're going to look at, how does the MBTI intersect with growth mindset? Is that intersection there? What might it actually look like for some of the work that you might be doing with your clients? So let's kind of jump right in. And as we do that, as we begin to look at the case for growth mindset, I just want to make sure and level set a little bit. So a lot of you may be very familiar with where growth mindset came from. It was actually researched from over a decade ago by a researcher named Carol Dweck. And it actually started out with looking at mindset in the context of observing children. Since then, however, what's been really cool about it is when your research sort of takes legs, right? And she's had numerous grants, numerous institutions that have allowed this research to be applied in organizational contexts. And we now actually have some data that we can look at as, what does growth mindset look like in an organizational context? And so my goal for us today is really just to present you with some of the data around it, some of the way I look at growth mindset, and then let you decide how growth mindset fits into the work that you do every single day. So let's jump right into some of the findings. So it looks like from research that when employees work for a growth mindset company, a couple of pretty interesting things happen. They are actually 34% likelier to feel a stronger sense of ownership and commitment to the company. That's such a big deal nowadays, right? Because another way of looking at that is engagement. Is their ownership and commitment from the employees to the organization? They're also 47% likelier to say that their colleagues are trustworthy. And we're going to look at that in just a little bit, because you might be thinking, as I did, my goodness, this has a little bit of this, an ethical implication. So we're going to look at that in just a while too. And then another interesting data set here is 65% likelier if I work for a growth mindset company to say that my company supports risk taking. I think a lot of companies took some pretty big risks in 2020, don't you? And 49% likelier to say that their company fosters innovation. I know that the last 9 months or so that I've been in conversations with different organizations, it has been those organizations that have taken the biggest risks and have opened themselves up to the greatest amount of innovation that are really thriving and coming back in this 2020 environment that has absolutely not been easy for many of us. And kind of bottom line here is, look at these in the context of, would you want this for your organization? When companies embrace growth mindset, they see three major things. They see greater employee empowerment and commitment, greater collaboration and innovation, and employees achieve more. Now, we're going to dive into each of these, but I'd ask you now, do you think your organization could use a little bit more of any of these? So let's make sure we're on the same page in terms of what is growth mindset. To do that, we have to hit the rewind button for just a minute, and we have to ask ourselves, what is a mindset? So for this, I'd actually like to hear from you. Can you use the questions box in the user interface here for GoToMeeting? And can you tell me, what do you think a mindset is? How would you define that to someone you're working with or a client that you're working with if they were to ask that of you right now? A way of looking at the world, perspective, outlook, viewpoint, belief, your approach to the world. I love that. Your paradigm. That's a really good way of saying it. How one thinks about things. I couldn't catch the name of who chatted that, but I think that's an awesome way of looking at it. So the way Carol Dweck actually reduced that for us was, she said, I'm going to define it for the growth mindset as being a mental framework that guides how people think, feel, and act in achievement contexts. Notice that distinction of achievement context, because that means it's not, let's just say, a framework for living or for life in general. It may not be my life philosophy, but it is the way that I feel, act, and guide in an achievement, and I'm guided in an achievement context. She also put forth the fact that there's really two observable mindsets. There's a fixed mindset and there's a growth mindset. And here's what we know. Individuals who believe that their talents are innate gifts tend to have a fixed mindset. They might say something like, wow, that person is naturally smart. An individual with a growth mindset believes that their talents can be developed. And they might say things like, I can get smarter through hard work and effort. Let's keep zooming into this in terms of the context of an organization. So how does an organization view employee capability? How do they view your potential, my potential, when we look at fixed and growth mindset? In a fixed mindset mentality for the view of employee capability, it's about employees standing out based on the talent and the skills that they have. And it actually engenders in employees a desire to come across as looking smart, to come across as looking talented, right? To fulfill that sort of a pedestal that you may have been placed on as the new hire for someone that they did a national search and you were a talented person to guide this new initiative they wanted. And now you're going to do everything you can, right? To look smart, to look talented, and to sort of earn or justify your seat there in that position. In contrast, a growth mindset perspective of employee potential and capability is not only the talents and skills that you and I have now, but our potential to develop those specifically through effort and persistence. And this leads to a radically different desire, a desire to learn. We're going to keep zooming in on this because what Carol actually found in her research is that mindset isn't just binary. It actually exists on a spectrum. So take a look at this spectrum. If we were to say that fixed mindset is on the left, growth mindset is on the right, it might actually look a little bit like this. If I have a fixed mindset, I might say things like, I am good at such and such. I am not good at such and such does not come easily to me. If I have a growth mindset, I may say things like, I have improved at X, or each time I try, I get better at, you fill in the blank. What I want you to notice in this spectrum view is continue to see how a fixed mindset looks at talents and skills in a more static way, and a growth mindset looks at it in terms of your viewpoint from a runway standpoint, a potential, your capability in a longer term effort. Also, research demonstrates with mindset that you don't have one predominant mindset for all areas of your life. In fact, you are certainly a whole person. You and I are, a whole person, but we have shifting mindsets from one area to another. So let's take a look at what that might actually look like. And this is actually slightly true in my case. I feel like I am a terrible cook. Earlier in my lifetime, because I have a preference for introversion and because I grew up in a family with a preference for extroversion, there was a certain sense of, oh, they are the talkers. I am not the talker. Therefore, I am not a public speaker. Or I might have said something like, I'm not good with data. Notice that as things shift, as you're focusing on one area of your life versus another, that mindset can also shift. So the very same person that feels like I am a terrible cook and I'm defined by that might be the same person that says, I have improved at managing a budget, kind of denoting that it was harder before. I wasn't as good at it before, but I've grown, I've learned, I've developed. It might be the same person that says, I get better at networking each time, or now I love working with my hands. Can you think of something in your life where initially it was very, very challenging, but you've embraced learning and growing in it so much to the degree that it's almost enjoyable at this point, or at minimum, maybe you don't mind it so much. If you can think of an area like that in your life, that was growth mindset at work specifically. So in our current world of work, how many of us can say that our employees or the clients that we work with and that we train and that we develop already know and have all the skills that they will ever need for the job that they're doing, or for the organization that they're working with, or to be successful in their lives? How many of us would say, yes, that's true? Go ahead and type that for me in the question box. Would you say that in the current world of work, you work with clients and employees who already possess all of the knowledge they need to be successful in their workplace, in their jobs, and for success in their lives? I'm seeing a lot of no's. I'm seeing a lot of false. It's a learning journey. Oh, I like this. Absolutely not! Exclamation point. That's perfect, because what you're ascertaining here is the fact that learning and growth is an implicit need that we actually have, especially in our current environment of work. So the big question is, does your organization have a growth mindset culture? My colleague, Dr. Martin Bolt, did a version of this presentation that focuses more on the individual progression of moving and shifting from a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. If you have not caught his presentation, you really should, because it has a very different flavor than this one does. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to just build on his amazing work, and I wanted to offer you a way to say, when I'm working with an organization, maybe you're directly employed by them, maybe you're consulting with them, what are some ways, some telltale signs that you can help them determine, are they a predominantly fixed mindset culture or a predominantly growth mindset culture? And for all you practitioners out there, you know as well as I do, you can't always just ask an organization, are you a fixed mindset or growth mindset? Because oftentimes what we find is those statements are answered aspirationally, or they're answered from one perspective, one seat in the stands. And oftentimes I get very different answers when I ask them more behaviorally. So here's what I'm going to offer you. I'm going to offer you a self-estimate. So think of an organization, one that you're a part of, maybe one that you're consulting with, one that you're about to pitch growth mindset consulting to, whatever it might be. And I'm going to show you 3 slides. On those 3 slides, I'm going to cluster some behavioral indicators of a fixed mindset organization and some behavioral indicators of a growth mindset culture. And what I want you to do is realize that not every bullet is going to fit that organization to a T. You're actually going to find some bullets on both sides. But what I really want you to do is I want you to look at the overall profile. Which one best describes the organization that you have in mind? Okay, so for those of you who are asking for the presentation, no worries, we will chat that for you, or we will send that to you afterwards of Dr. Martin Bolt's presentation. that would be very worth your time. Okay, so are you ready? Do you have an organization in mind? I hope you do. Remember, we're going to do 3 slides of this. So here's slide 1. And remember, not everything's going to fit. So you're looking for which side best describes your organization. Here's slide 1 of 3. So I'd love to just be completely silent while you read, but I'm mindful that some people may be listening to this on a car ride. They may be listening to the webinar recording, on a subway. So let me talk through some of it. If your organization has a predominantly fixed mindset culture, you might value talented individuals, folks who stand out based on their talent. In a growth mindset, you might value individuals who stand out because they're willing to learn and grow and put in the effort. A fixed mindset might actually emphasize a handful of star employees, the doers and the shakers, the folks that really get the organization going. In a growth mindset, they might emphasize the potential of all employees. Fixed mindset, there's a greater tendency to hire roles from outside of the company. Why? Because you're looking for talent. You're looking for someone that brings the pedigree, the talent, and the skills that you need already. Growth mindset organization tend to hire from inside of the company. Again, there's always exceptions, but we're looking at overall profile fit here. Also, a fixed mindset company when hiring might be looking at applicant credentials and pedigree over potential. They're scouring the resume to see what you bring to the table based on your past experience, based on what you've amassed. Folks with a growth mindset, organizations here, they look for applicants' approach to problems, what they've done with their potential, with their runway, their commitment overall to learning over credentials and pedigree. Go ahead and make your selection here, and let's jump right over to the second slide. And by the way, it is totally fine for you to just do this on your own and not let us know where you think your organization falls. This is really for you, but if you're chatting us, we love that too. Here's slide number 2. In an organization with a fixed mindset, there's an emphasis on accomplishment, right? Results. In a growth mindset, there's an emphasis on learning and creativity because the process is informative. In a fixed mindset, there's an emphasis on rewarding output. What did you accomplish? What was the final result of a project? In a growth mindset, it might be rewarding the process and the effort that you undertook, whether or not you made that project a success. In a fixed mindset company, risks are contained and they're oftentimes only pursued in limited instances. There may be a lot of data and evidence to suggest that there will be success taking on this risk. In a growth mindset company, employees are encouraged to take smart risks, even when the organization knows that not all of them will pan out. They won't all succeed. In a fixed mindset, reward systems are based on achievement of the original project goal. Did you meet the original project goal? Did you sell that client? Did you close that deal? Did you finish that initiative to the degree that we set out for? In a growth mindset company, reward of employees for important and useful lessons learned, even if the project does not meet its original goals. Let's keep going. Final slide. Here's my third slide of 3. So here we have fixed mindset, reward competition across employees and departments, right? Because you want talent to rise to the top. In a growth mindset, employees encouraged to collaborate, seek help from each other. Collaboration is explicitly rewarded. Notice that I included here the word explicitly, again, because oftentimes organizations say absolutely collaboration is important to us, but you got to dig into where they really reward things. What behavioral indicators and reward systems do they offer their leaders and employees? Because that's what's really being reinforced, right? And so collaboration isn't just about getting the people to the table that need to be there to get something done. It's about, are you harnessing diversity? Are you letting people collaborate and rewarding that because it brings diversity of perspective? Because it's a big part of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? To harness that diversity. In a fixed mindset, employees are reprimanded for setbacks and mistakes. So there's a little bit of a fear of failure there. In a growth mindset, employees are encouraged to capitalize on setbacks and move forward effectively. Let's learn from this. Let's move forward in a positive sort of way. And then here are a couple of interesting ones, because certainly budget considerations come into mind here, but Does the organization have concrete goals and policies in place that actually support competition, talent, and output, or that reinforce growth mindset? Similarly, are there defined and demonstrative ways in which there is a commitment to employee development and advancement? Usually in a fixed mindset organization, there's not as much of that. In a growth mindset organization, there are broadly available development and advancement opportunities. One more comment here. I worked with a higher ed institution at one point, consulting with them. And what's interesting about it is they're a higher education institution. So you would say they believe in learning, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you say they believe in learning and growth and they're committed to it? It's on their, value system. It's on their t-shirts. It's everywhere. But when I dug into how do you demonstrate this for employees, here's what I found out, and it may shock you as much as it shocked me. Employees work about 2,080 hours a year, right? That's a number that we commonly use in HR to do pay periods, those kinds of things, 2,080 hours. Of those hours, this higher ed institution allowed employees to seek professional development for 8 hours a year. That averages out to less than 1% of their total work time as a demonstrable commitment from the organization that says we value your advancement, your development, your learning, your growth. So again, this is where your consulting hat comes in, because you have to help organizations sometimes realize that between belief and espousing something and actually doing it, there could be quite a big divide, right? So there's always room for improvement in all of us, but it's important to recognize that need for improvement. So how did you do on your assessment? Let's actually see. I see a couple of things here. Russ, I see you say, wow. I'd love to hear wow about what specifically. Okay, so kind of a combo from some folks. A lot of you saying fixed mindset on most things. Here's another way for you to spot check this. Are you ready? I'm going to give you some behavioral cues. What happens when your organization is a predominantly fixed mindset organization? Now, I say predominantly there because remember, you have all kinds of leaders and divisions and departments in an organization. You may be a lucky person who works for a manager that you trust and that's good to you and that's a really good fit, and another colleague may not be so lucky, right? So we have to think about this in terms of predominant. But when we see a predominantly fixed mindset organization, here's what the research shows happens. This is what employees do. They pull back from facing challenges. There's a fear of failure and an avoidance of risk, a resistance to make an effort, to dive into a challenge, to learn and grow. With that comes a corresponding sense of increased stress because of uncertainty and challenge. So as practitioners, I want you to listen throughout this presentation that growth mindset goes hand in hand with resilience. Employees will also see mistakes as detrimental, as missed opportunities for success. There's a failure to learn from mistakes or to learn from challenges, or really a pulling back from engaging in challenges at all, because that way we don't have to face failure. Competition with others on the basis of talent. Have you ever worked for an organization like that, where you felt like your manager was pinning you up against other staff members or leaders for that talented, person to sort of rise to the top? And when that happens, employees emphasize their talent, and guess what that tempts you to do? To conceal deficiencies, because success depends on promoting and protecting yourself. I love what Thomas wrote in the chat, fear of curiosity. I love that. I love that, Thomas. That's a really good one. So here's what also happens with organizations in a predominantly fixed mindset culture. Employees report that only a star set of employees are highly valued. Have you ever been in an organization like that, where really only a certain set of employees get all the development dollars, all the development time? Employees are less committed. Employees feel that the organization does not have their back. Employees are worried about failure. They hold back from pursuing innovative projects. This has been a year where we have had to innovate. We have had to really be scrappy, right, and show our grit, and growth mindset organizations have had a much easier time of that. Look at this last one, which I think is powerful. Employees keep secrets. They cut corners and they cheat to get ahead. Now, I don't know how that lands with you, but it didn't land well with me from this perspective. I wanted to know if this is what research shows, then I think it begs the question of why. So in about 2 or 3 slides, we're going to talk about the why here. But let's first talk about flipping that, the growth mindset, predominant culture. So this was a way for you to spot check your self-estimate. Are these things present in your organization? To what degree? And let's flip the script now and let's see what happens when you have a predominantly growth mindset. Here are the behavioral results of employees. Employees collaborate, they innovate and they take risks. They seek feedback from each other. They go look for that input. They're inspired by somebody else's talent and they go learn from them. They admit errors and share information, and they're willing to dive into a new challenge, an area where they have to learn and grow and put effort towards it. They're iterative. They look for new and useful strategies to get to where they need to go. There's a boosted desire for learning, and there's a potential to see the development of new skills. Let's look at one more slide on this from the organization side. By the way, someone chatted that they can't see the chat. I apologize. That's the way that this interface is set up, is that we can see your chats because they're submitted to us as questions, but you don't really see the chat roll. We see the chat roll, which is why we're trying to bring it up as much as we can and share what we're seeing from folks. Thank you for your question. One last slide here. What happens when there's a predominantly growth mindset culture? Companies see more innovative ideas and products. Isn't that pretty cool? Managers see a greater potential in their employees. That means that managers report that employees have a stronger potential for innovation, for leadership, for collaboration. Also, they identify talent for new leaders earlier on. There's a greater unleashing of potential across the company, more opportunities for talent recruitment, retention, and development, and look, happier employees. And also, how we go about our work is different. Employees in a growth mindset culture report that they go about their work in a more innovative, risk-taking, and collaborative approach to getting things done. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a pretty motivating work environment. Now, so again, this is a spot check for you if your self-estimate matches these behavioral indicators. This is also, by the way, a really good set of talking points for you if you are in the position of needing to help an organization see the value of growth mindset by showing them the impact that it has on their ways of working, showing them the impact that it has on their outcomes. So I promised to talk about a question that I said didn't really hit me so right. So I actually had this question of, okay, so if employees in a fixed mindset culture, if they end up cheating and cutting corners and keeping secrets, why is that? Why do they exhibit predominantly behaviors that we would predominantly describe as negative? Things like competing and not sharing information, pulling away from challenges, concealing deficiencies, or cheating for self-promotion. And we have to ask ourselves this question from the standpoint of, are these folks are they wired differently? Are they less than nice people, right? I don't think any of those things are true. Here's what research shows. Research shows that the fixed mindset environment leads people to want to look smart and to come across as, things come easily to you. And this is how you can get things done because you're just sort of naturally wired or talented for it. And therefore, it leads to a certain set of reactions. It triggers some cognitive and behavioral implications. And this is what it leads folks to do. It leads folks to avoid what is difficult, what is challenging. So if I encounter something that's difficult for me, well, I'm not going to be inefficient, right? And, and sort of spin my wheels on it. I'm just going to pull back from it and kind of stick to swimming in my lane. I'm going to give up if I face obstacles. I'm going to see effort as negative. If I can't just knock it out of the park easily, quickly, and efficiently, then I may not be talented. I shouldn't play in that space at all. I might fear mistakes or failure. I might become defensive of negative criticism because that criticism says you didn't make it. You weren't talented enough, right? Or I might feel threatened by the success of others. Because again, we're measuring talent, you know, as if it is this static thing and either you have it or you don't, and somebody has more of it or you have less of it. And where it sort of tugs on me as a practitioner, as somebody that works with individuals and teams and leaders, is the fact that the end result for you and I, if we allow a fixed mindset to sort of be predominant in our lives, is that we'll plateau. We will lack a desire to learn and grow. We will actually achieve less, and there will be less explored potential. I don't know about you, but that's a pretty painful thing. And I want to help other individuals not regret not putting in an effort to learn and to grow. I want to inspire, myself and others to show more of that growth mindset, to adopt some more of those growth mindset behaviors. I'm seeing some more comments here about like just how much the fixed mindset stifles innovation. And I think that's absolutely true. It's scary, right? If you have to play on the basis of talent, it's scary to actually jump into something that you might not be naturally good at. And the onus is on our organizations to change the way we reward from a reward of just talent. We're not saying talent isn't important, that's fine, but we need to also reward effort, right? Persistence, sticking through. And yes, development is very important. I think I see here from Martinez. Thank you for that comment. So I promised we would talk a little bit about this. Is growth mindset the new soft skill? I have been in learning and development for many, many years. I started in HR way back in the early 2000s. And every couple of years, a new soft skill comes out, something that becomes sort of a buzzword. It makes its way onto every job description, and managers start to look for it. Books are written about it, etc. But you know what? So I have a little bit of a skepticism when I look at some of these things, but I will say the case I've been making to you today is all based on research, and it's all based on my experience of sort of realizing where are organizations taking growth mindset. And so before I take you to that shift, let's kind of level set and let's see, what do we know so far? So far, we've determined the fact that mindset affects all of these things. How we view intelligence and capability, how we respond to challenges, setbacks, mistakes, our own willingness to learn from these, to take risks, to invest effort, to be curious, to jump in, to sort of get our hands dirty, and the fortitude to actually stick it through. But new research on growth mindset is also showing some pretty interesting stuff. It's showing that changing a mindset is possible. It's also showing that interventions where you design something rooted in growth mindset principle can support a shift from fixed to growth mindset. It's also showing that the environment has a lot to do with keeping up mindset. There's some pretty interesting studies that actually show that you personally can possess a growth mindset. But if you are in an environment where your peers and your colleagues have a predominantly fixed mindset, and your organization does too, that impacts how much you pursue your growth mindset. Isn't that interesting? So another, sort of interesting reason why organizations have to pay attention to this. And here's what research has now definitively shown from an outcome standpoint. Changing from a fixed to a growth mindset can lead to increased growth mindset behaviors. Are these things you want in your organization? Do you want folks to face challenges, to learn from their mistakes and their setbacks, or do we just want to pretend that we're not supposed to have any, right? Do you want folks to seek new strategies, to seek feedback, or folks to be afraid of criticism? Do you want folks who put in the effort, the persistence, and have an increased learning desire? Research has also shown now that changing from a fixed to a growth mindset does in fact lead to increased achievement. So here's what's happening. Organizations are starting to figure out that this isn't just a cool new buzz term. This has legs to it. And so there's some pretty big shifts that are occurring in the marketplace. And I want to point out two of them to you today, because I think they might give you some interesting sort of fodder for conversations with your clients, or if you're a manager and you're thinking about your own management style and figuring out, how you can be more of a growth mindset culture or a growth mindset manager. So there's some pretty big shifts happening in terms of the job market and in talent and leader development. And here's what I mean. These are some of the newly desired skills. We're seeing a rise in these kinds of skills being looked for in job descriptions. Take a look at this: demonstrative capacity for being capable, independent learners. I'm going to give you an example of one of these in just a moment. Passion for learning and growth. It used to be that we only expected training and development practitioners to have that, right? Surely you would be passionate about learning and growth if you're in training and development, but what about someone in IT? What about an engineer? What about someone who puts together, parts for an aircraft carrier? Collaborative problem solver and learner. Demonstrative evidence that you can take on and overcome challenges and setbacks. Greater focus on effort and persistence over talent alone, and resilience and the ability to work within uncertainty. Again, I'm mentioning here, resilience and growth mindset really go together, because there's that embracing of, where can I take control in a situation where I don't feel in control? I don't feel that I'm talented and equipped, naturally or at this time for this. So I know that I'm not where I need to be, but a growth mindset says, I know that I can get there. And that has a whole slew, by the way, of research from a neuroscience standpoint about what that does to the dopamine pathway, what for you to shift the reward systems when you give yourself subjective rewards, to shift those from your output and your achievement alone, and to shift it to being willing to put in the effort, being willing to persist, to have fortitude, and to stick it through in a challenge. So let's zoom in on some examples of these. I want to show you just a couple that you may or may not be aware of. So growth mindset in hiring is really starting to pick up, because growth mindset firms value potential, capacity, and passion for learning. They realize that growth mindset is more informative. If we can detect growth mindset in an applicant, it's more informative than their pedigree and their credentials alone. So they're looking for things like people who love challenges, people who want to grow, people who want to collaborate. Here's a couple of examples. So this one's pretty touted, and it's been touted for a very long time, but famously Jack Welch from GE was always known as sort of hiring people for what he called their runway, not their current pedigree and potentials, but where he could see you going. And he was famously known for believing so much in people's capacity for growth that he would actually invest thousands of hours in grooming, mentoring, and coaching people, and in showing leaders how to do the same thing. And by doing so, that was his way of building talent internally and not just looking for talent from the outside. But we're starting to see that shift even more now. Google recently reported that they are appearing to make a hiring shift themselves. They're beginning to hire more people who lack college degrees, but have this: a proven capability to be an independent learner. So we're answering the question, is growth mindset the new soft skill? Here's another example. CME Group had growth mindset sort of immersed into their culture. They started learning all about it. And as a result, they decided, we're going to shift our hiring strategy and we're going to look for a growth mindset quality in our applicants. And they switched their interview questions to be behavioral, to be questions such as, describe a time when you confronted a challenge. And notice the second part. How did you work through it to overcome your doubts? Have you been in an interview where the first part was there, describe a time where you confronted a challenge, and oftentimes you feel the temptation to say, it was my talent, that sort of got me through it. I had the inherent capability to face that challenge. But what they're doing here is they're looking for the ones that really tested you, the challenges that really, really were difficult, where you doubted yourself, where you may have faced some real times where you felt like this may be too much for me. Even things like, imposter syndrome might have come in there for you. And they're looking for candidates who respond to these questions. I also said that there's a shift in terms of talent and leader development, and I want to highlight Microsoft here, because Microsoft has been doing some stuff recently that's rooted in growth mindset. what they're doing is they're creating these programs all throughout their organization to help identify folks with a growth mindset quality. So for example, they're doing hackathons where folks present an idea that's interesting. They can actually, you can self-select to be a part of it, whether it is or not in your department, in your division. And all of these sort of innovative ideas are being presented at all different times of the organization, not just as, in the beginning of a year to develop strategic initiatives for that year, but there's this ongoing culture of welcoming innovation. There's also an entire push for high-risk projects. These are projects that Microsoft reported they know some of them will not work out. They know that a significant portion of them might not work out, but they're inviting employees to think in an innovative way and to suspend a fear for risk and to take smart risks. So we're not talking about unreasonable risk here, we're talking about smart risks, but they're recognizing that when employees are part of a high-risk project, whether or not it pans out, if Microsoft can reward that effort, that persistence, they're going to see rising talent in those folks, greater propensity for innovation, greater propensity for collaboration. And by doing so, they've identified new leader talent in an organic kind of way, not just folks who sort of raise their hand up and say, I'd like to be a leader, or not just folks who are in their high potential program, or folks who are moving into leadership development programs specifically. And here's what's happening with Microsoft as a result. This is what they're reporting. They're reporting that they're seeing more and more leaders rise to levels of leadership than they have seen in a traditional development model. So the whole purpose of a leadership development model is to identify folks who can assume positions of leadership. And there's a tremendous amount of investment that organizations make to do that, to get that information. This is happening for them organically, and it's supplementing their traditional development program. And here are the outcomes that they've reported already. Improved performance, expansion of product and service directions. Isn't that interesting? More innovative products and services, broader pool to choose from for succession planning, and earlier identification of that new leader talent. So pretty interesting here. On top of all of those things that we said earlier, that if you work for a growth mindset culture, you simply have happier employees. Employees who report that not only the work that they do, but how they go about doing the work is actually a real source of satisfaction. So let's keep going. Caitlin, I want to pause for just a second there. Anything interesting that you want to point out I've seen some wows, some exclamations in the chat. Is there anything that you've seen that you want to point out?
We definitely are getting some good questions, which we will hold for the end. And if we, like we said in the beginning, if we're not able to answer the questions right now, we will be following up with those. But I would agree. I'm seeing wows definitely in a lot of sort of, I imagine, a lot of like head nodding as you're talking. It seems like it's definitely resonating with a lot of different people in different departments and industries.
Okay, sounds great. So 2 quick questions. Somebody asked about, are we going to look at MBTI and personality? Yes, we are actually right now. And another person asked, are we going to get this slide deck? The answer there is also yes. There will be some follow-up communication that will go out to everyone, and you will get a recording of this webinar. And actually, most folks who listen to this webinar will probably be via recording, and you will also be able to see the slides. So let's jump into this question. As a company, the Myers-Briggs Company has asked themselves, how does mindset and personality intersect? Is there a connection there at all? And it's a pretty important question. For those of you who might be new to the MBTI, it's a personality indicator, and that's what's reflected here on the right-hand side of your screen. It reflects the 16 personality types from the MBTI assessment. But here's the answer directly from the creator of Growth Mindset herself. Mindsets are an important part of your personality, but you can change them. And just by knowing about the mindsets, you can start thinking and reacting in new ways. So even Carol Dweck, as the creator of sort of this growth mindset, saw that mindset and personality were connected, but she saw them converging at a place where you help folks, you kind of hold up a mirror to somebody, you help boost their self-awareness, and you help them make decisions. Self-awareness about their mindset, self-awareness about their personality type, and you help them make decisions about how they think about things, how they react to things, and how they then pursue in achievement contexts. So let's dig into there a little bit more. If MBTI is sort of new to you, this will be about the only slide that I'll have on the MBTI. So bear with me if you are one of our certified practitioners and experts, but the MBTI instrument does show quite a few things that are useful in growth mindset. For example, it's going to show you and I what comes easily to us, our natural preferences, the stuff that feels as easy and as comfortable and as effortless as picking up a pen and signing a document. It's also going to show us stuff like what we find naturally motivating or satisfying in work. So think of this as stuff we might naturally gravitate to, areas where we might be a little bit more embracing of challenge or difficulty. It's also going to show us our response to change. So if we're in a work environment with a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stress, it's going to show us how our personality uniquely wires us to react to change and stress triggers in a very unique way. But it's also going to show us, by virtue of showing you what is natural and effortless, it's also going to show you what is opposite to your preference. It's going to show you areas where developing skills might actually be a little bit tougher. So let me put it another way. If we have a fixed mindset, if you're working with a client and they have a fixed mindset, then giving them a personality assessment might actually be a really good way to box somebody in, because they might walk away saying, I am good at this, I am not good at that. So the shift that you need to help your clients make, or your team make, if you're a leader in this, in this webinar, is if we need to develop a skill, especially in an opposite preference area, we need a growth mindset to support our desire to learn, to face the challenge, the difficulty, to take smart risks, to seek feedback, and to grow skills in that area. Why? Because that area might actually be a little bit challenging. I sort of previewed this for you earlier, but as somebody with a preference for introversion who grew up in a family where the preference was strongly for extroversion, there were things that I sort of drew a line on, and I said, okay, well, my family, those guys over there, those folks with a preference for extroversion, they're the talkers. They're the folks who would pursue a career, public speaking, or talking to folks, or training and development and standing in front of a classroom, developing virtual workshops, delivering workshops for small groups, large groups, for entire, conference presentations, etc. As my adulthood sort of began to unravel and my interest started to step in, so I took the strong interest inventory. My number one interest, is for that enterprising. So I have this natural desire to persuade others, to influence others, to help others, see new information and kind of act on it. And so I decided to go on the journey of saying, you know what, even though I have a preference for introversion, and my family used to always say things like, you can't get a word out of Rachel. Rachel is so quiet. We have no idea what Rachel is thinking. Rachel has a poker face. You have to ask her what she's thinking. Despite all of these sort of things that I heard from my family and from my environment, they also started sort of presenting this interesting opportunity for me to say, you know what, let me start to see what it's like to do a little bit more of presenting of myself in contexts that you might say are for folks who have a preference for extroversion. So it is not uncommon for me to deliver a virtual workshop, a full day workshop, multiple days of a workshop, and for folks to say, now you have a preference for extroversion, don't you? And that's because you're seeing the part of me where I have developed and grown my skills, even though there were times where it was very challenging. There were times where it didn't come as naturally or as easily for me as it did for my family members. And because of that, I sort of boxed myself in. And there may be areas in your life, areas where your clients, if you can walk them through the process of exploration, there may be areas where they are also making assumptions about their personality preferences. And the danger here is we never want to let folks use type as an excuse. So I'm borrowing that phrase from my brilliant colleague, Michael Segovia. He says, don't use type as an excuse. And this is what he means by this. If you walk away knowing that you have a preference for introversion, it is not an excuse for you to go and tell your boss the next day, I am no longer going to participate in any social event. I am no longer going to speak up in meetings or even attend meetings for that matter, because I would rather just be off reflecting and thinking about things and then communicating with you in writing afterwards, right? So the purpose of type and in your role as a practitioner is to help folks question their assumptions about their personality and where they're seeing boundaries around their personality and their skill set, and helping them make adjustments to that, because we don't just want them to know about their personality, we want them to develop their personality. So when we go off and we do workshops, when my team and I go do workshops, knowing the MBTI is just a starting point. That's the beginning. Your self-awareness, your four-letter type is not the definition of your potential or capability. It's a starting point for your development journey. From there, we have to build. So we have to help folks apply their self-awareness and develop their personality, essentially to do three things. One, you want folks to become aware of what their natural preferences are, and also what are those less explored areas that may even be blind spots. I wouldn't be a training and development professional today if I would have allowed introversion, right, to box me in, if I would have allowed even my family upbringing and culture to box me in. It would have been very easy to say, I just didn't come with a natural public speaking talent and sort of not even face that challenge. The second thing you have to help your clients or your team members do is be comfortable jumping in and trying things that are of your opposite preference and that will most likely be challenging. Do you remember that exercise we use where we have folks sign their name with the natural hand that they normally do, and then we flip that and we say, now sign it with the other? I often follow that up with asking them, now who would like to sign up to using your non-preferred hand exclusively for the next 2 weeks? And I have very few takers to that question. Why? Because it's challenging, because it would be uncomfortable, it would be difficult. But our job is to show folks that in order to learn, grow, face challenges, not be afraid of failure, jump in, be more innovative, adopt those growth mindset behaviors, we can't use MBTI to box us in. We actually have to use it to carve out a learning pathway for ourselves. And we have to invite people to self-select areas where they could meaningfully make an impact in their lives and their individual influence by shaping or working on skills in that area. So what does that mean? It means I'm not a proponent of you going out tomorrow and just doing everything of your opposite preference just for the sake that it's opposite. I'm actually more of a proponent of saying, what would be meaningful for you? What skill set, what blind spot is actually a barrier for you right now at work, or to a goal that you might have, or maybe you want to, do something different. Maybe you want to be a leader. Maybe you want to do these other things, but you feel inhibited in meetings, or your introverted preference makes you think that you should only speak up when something is perfectly refined and developed rather than additive to the conversation, right? Where are these things boxing you in, and where could moving the needle actually prove to be really good for you? So I would encourage you to, when you're working with your clients, and I'm going to send this as part of the deck, but here is a somewhat simplistic and linear protocol that you might actually think of when you design an activity with your clients. Here are some of the things that you're going to want to do to blend the MBTI with growth mindset. Are you ready? So we're going to want to help our clients listen for and recognize what mindset they're bringing to their personality. So it's great that you went through a debrief. It's great that you found out that you have preferences, let's say for ENFP or INTJ. Now let's figure out what's your mindset about that. Is it boxing you in? Is it giving you an excuse, right, for the way that you are? Or how are you thinking about it? Then the next one might be inviting your clients to develop opposite preferences. Again, where it's meaningful. I am a big proponent that adult learners don't have this tremendous amount of excess time on their hands. And I'm also a big proponent that I don't want them to tackle 30 things. I want them to tackle one or two things that are meaningful to you, that will move the needle specifically and where they would like to see improvement. But I want to invite them to do it in areas that are challenging, because that's where growth mindset sort of thrives. And then I want to walk them through, and you would want to do this too, where does it trigger for them fixed mindset related to these things. So if I keep following my example, let's say early on in my career where I was doing public speaking, let's say earlier on in my 20s, what would be the situations and the context that would make me want to shrink back and pull back and make me want to just say, you know what, this thing is not for me, I'm not going to do it anymore, because we want to be aware of those. We want to anticipate them so we can curb their impact when they come along, because they will come along. And then you want to help give your clients strategies. Here's what a growth mindset looks like in action. And you want to try new strategies. You want to seek feedback from people. If somebody's better at that thing that you want to do than you, go and learn from them, collaborate with them, and be open to mistakes as part of that feedback process. And then you want to help them how it hinders them. If you want to this into is a largely or a predominantly fixed mindset organization, that intervention that you're doing may not stick as much as you would like it to. So we have to address the organization top down, and we have to address the employees, from sort of bottom up. You also want to help folks shift those subjective rewards that they give themselves mentally, and you want to help them look for ways that motivate them to stick it through, to have the fortitude to iterate, to mistakes and still continue and look at all of these things as being informative to their learning and development process. So what I've done for you here is I've just developed a kind of linear protocol for helping somebody take their MBTI type and apply it to a direct challenge at work with growth mindset in mind. That's what you want to do. You want to use the MBTI type to help others identify keyword meaningful challenges in learning and growth, because you want to make it sticky for folks. So the last thing that I want to just share with you guys is, I don't know what your capacity is for doing this for an organization, but I shared with you that you want to do it top down, and you also want to do it from an individual standpoint. So you want to help individuals adopt a growth mindset, but you also want to create a growth mindset culture in the organization, because when you have growth mindset being developed individually, but the environment isn't there to support it, there's going to be a little bit of a breakdown. So see this when my team and I do this for for organizations. We actually do this in a sort of three-part model. We help teams and individuals with the MBTI. We do MBTI debriefs. We help them learn all about themselves, their strengths, their blind spots, where they're naturally strong, where there might be areas of challenge. We help build that way a sort of harnessing of the diversity in the team chemistry. And we look at things like how the MBTI ties to real important skill sets. Like I deliver workshops on MBTI and enhancing communication, building resilience, working through change, etc. Then we move into leadership capacity, and we help leaders understand what their role is in a growth mindset culture. What does it mean actionably and practically, right? To harness diversity, to practice inclusive leadership, to recognize your own biases. What does it say to your direct reports if you are not willing to face challenging areas and you use type as an excuse, as we talked about earlier? If you just say to your direct reports, therefore shift to me, what does that say? What are you modeling specifically? And then also, how are you being that cornerstone of effective feedback for your direct reports who are on their way to a pathway, because they need feedback. They need to be able to iterate and hear how they're doing. And then, of course, we work at the organizational level to support these returns that organizations want. Organizations often come to us and say, we have silos and we want more innovation and we want more collaboration and we want the things that we start getting into things like mindset. And let me tell you, sometimes those are difficult conversations initially because organizations tend to value efficiency over effort, right? That's actually like a tweetable statement. Organizations tend to value efficiency over effort. And because of it, oftentimes selling something like growth mindset and really making it a sticky part of the organization is going to be a little bit of a challenge for you. It's not going to be a one and done type of thing. So with that, I just want to say MBTI is not the only one. I use growth mindset with the TKI for persuasion style and conflict style. We use it with FIRO for understanding how you show up for people and what you expect from other people and how you might grow in those areas that would be personally meaningful to you. I mentioned today how the strong interest inventory showing me that I had a strong desire for enterprising, how that connected to growth mindset for me and to my development pathway towards a training and development practitioner, towards trying to do thought leadership and public speaking. So I hope you are walking away with realizing that the MBTI is a starting point and there are many other starting points. With that, I want to thank you so much for attending this Fostering Growth Mindset and Your Personality Development for Success. Caitlin, would you close us out?
Yeah, so we unfortunately do not have time for questions, but we did see a ton of questions come through that were great questions. So we're going to answer those via email, and we'll probably provide some of the answers to the group for some of the really good questions that we've seen. So thank you so much, everyone. And if you have any other questions that you think of, feel free to send us an email, and we will be sending out the slides and the recording along with some other practitioner resources and more information that Rachel mentioned in the next few days. So thank you so much.